Sorry, sir. I welcome Dr. Tulsi Rao, sir. He is the senior most and very prominent, renowned biodiversity and wildlife expert of India. And he holds a PhD from Kakti University in environmental sciences. Is one of the very committed and dedicated forest officer. His work can be seen in the rejuvenation of wildlife and conservation of forest in the Seychelles Tiger Reserve. We served a long time there, and we can see the results what he dedicated there. And he's the recipient of many international awards, and he visited many countries on the conservation programs. And he is one of the author of this our prestigious book. He the lead author actually for this Eastern Ghats Environment Outlook. He did a marvelous work in mangrove conservation program in Koringa Wildlife Sanctuary, and there also he published a world-class book on Koringa conservation program. And because Koringa is one of the area, a mangrove area, which is vulnerable to climate change and all these things. So he has a vast experience. It's my, I cannot describe his biodata in a brief and a short time. It's a vast experience, and he has been a constant mentor and advisor to CGR and Grace. So now he agreed to speak to us, maybe in spite of all his schedules and other programs. I welcome sir to speak on this occasion, sir, and share your experience and messages, thoughts. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Umameshwara Garu, for giving me this great opportunity to speak with the people who are working in the biodiversity and, of course, outside also. Since the past two speakers delivered the lecture on the science and it's in science part of the biodiversity and the climate and the origin of the issues and all, only just so the effect climate change, the vice versa. So, mainly these two are very important subjects: biodiversity and the climate change. It is a variability among living organisms. That means variety of the species, the living species that have been evolved for ages, for millions of years, they have been evolving and evolving. This Earth has come into existence about 450 crores of years back. That means 4.5 billion of years. Since then, after 100 crores of years, first living thing has emerged in the oceans. Since then, the evolutionary process is taking place, and now you can see what all you are seeing. The planet kind of hospitable and what the Panchabhutas are. Nela, that is earth, near water, Nela, Niru, Ning is sky, is you that need to exist this planet. So far to human minds, to our knowledge, this is the only available living planet on which we are living. So we are the junior-most species on this planet when comparing with the species that are not only our contemporary animals and plants, even those species which have been got extinct. So there have already 5 mass extinctions taken place, and most of the species wiped out from the this planet. Oh, sorry. The next mass extinction is going to take place because of the thoughtless actions of the human beings on this planet. So therefore, this variety of living organisms, both the plants and animals, they live in a complex web. When I say the complex web, that means it's a kind of fabric, ecological fabric, in which all the species are linking with each other, with one another, between the species, among the species they live, and they share their contributions to each other. So that's why we call it the ecological complex. When I say the ecological complex, that means during photosynthesis, plants, they manufacture carbohydrates and break the H2O, water, into hydrogen and oxygen. Oxygen will be liberated into the air, which we inhale. Otherwise, we don't have the oxygen to breathe in. So the trees are very important component of the planet. So also the animals also contribute a lot to the environment and ecology. These two requires non-living environment called soil, water, and the sky in the sense, the fire, and all other things what I narrated in the beginning itself. So these are the part of the uh, biodiversity. So when I say about an animal, it is an organism. That organism has been came into existence because of the arrangement of nucleotides at genetic level. Therefore, biodiversity is also seen as a part of the genetic environment. Okay, genetic diversity leads to the species diversity. When I say the species diversity, that means the populations of different species, they form into communities. Communities. Each community depends on the interactions of living and non-living environment. So all these communities, they form into the ecosystems, and the ecosystems, the integration of the ecosystem, that form into the biosphere. From the depths of the land mass, depths of the oceanic mass, into the air, onto the surface of waters and land, into the air, to some distance, to a certain distance, where we can find different animals and plant bodies. That's how biodiversity is a very important and a prominent, it plays an excellent role uh, in making us to live very comfortably on this planet. So Earth is the home to countless species of flora and fauna. So known as the diversity of life. It's also called biodiversity. There's a variation of life on the Earth. It is a major factor in nature's resilience. When I say the resilience, so the variety of species on this planet, along with their habitat conditions and the complex web of life, so all these things contribute for the life on this planet. So biodiversity is a major factor in nature's resilience. When I say the resilience, when all these flora or fauna, when they consume for their very sustenance, again recycling takes place, and the system will be a perpetual system. That means like a SDGs, self-sustaining development goals, like that. The entire environment is a self-sustained ecosystem. So only the healthy ecosystems are being created on this planet, and each ecosystem, it is interdependent webs of living with their physical environment. When I say the physical environment, maybe to the oxygen cycle, nitrogen cycle, carbon cycle, all these things, phosphorus and sulfur cycles, hydrological cycles. These are the complementary systems that help creating the healthy ecosystems on this planet. Our ecosystems provide us with clean air, fresh waters, food, resources, other resources, and medicinal plants. Because of our rapid population growth and unsustainable consumption patterns, these are the primary causes of the habitat and biodiversity loss on this planet. This is now happening. So up to 10,000 times faster than for millions of years before. The major threats of the biodiversity are, you all know that already, my previous speakers, they already told, habitat loss, climate change, and many other factors, and increase of the human populations, and developmental projects, and unwanted developments. All these things contribute the loss of the biodiversity on this planet. If you look at the IPBES report, 2019 report, it has identified that 1 million species are now at risk of disappearance. IUCN Red List of Threatened Species also identified decline in 41% of the amphibians, 25% of mammals, 34% of conifers, 13% of birds, 31% of sharks and rays from the ocean, and 33% of reef-building corals. These reef-building corals are the main absorbers of the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and 27% of the crustaceans, they're all threatened with extinction. Extinction means we can't see them anymore on this planet. So that is the kind of thing. Already, my previous speakers that talked about the extinction rate and all these things. See, as told by Madam Faridaji, WWF's latest Living Planet report also estimated that we have lost about 68% of all vertebrate wildlife populations since 1970s. That's more than half of all birds, mammals, reptiles, amphibians, and fish gone in just 50 years. Not even a single species has been created by the human beings. They are all the products of the nature. And when we don't have the capacity to create them, and we don't have the ethics to kill them, to push them back to the brink of extinction. So it's all the only one species that the Homo sapiens creating a lot of devastating effect on the not only in the ecosystems, even they're the contributors for the climate change. Biodiversity loss is a big threat to the humans as do by the climate change also. Loss is attributable to several causes, but by far the biggest culprits are the habitat destruction, as I told you, over exploitation of the species, and now the climate change. It is also contributing a lot for the disappearance of the species from this planet. Climate change is climate change is natural. There are two: natural climate change and induced climate change. Natural climate change happens because of the certain variations in the climate conditions. But artificial climate change or induced climate change is because of the human interventions. So changes in climates is a natural. For example, the last ice age, that's 11,500 years back, it has happened, and that time global temperatures were 5 degrees centigrade lower than what it is now, the average temperature of the present scenario. So, as is told by my previous speakers, climate is the long-term atmospheric conditions, and weather varies constantly, but we are now experiencing temperature rises at unprecedented speed. Scientists believe that human activities are responsible for this climate change, and climate change is altering many Earth's ecosystems. When I say the Earth's ecosystem, the ecosystem that are there on this planet, right from the tundras to the temperate regions and to the subtropical and tropical regions. When I say the tropical again, we'll be talking about the ecosystems of wet evergreen forests and uh, wet evergreen forests, semi-evergreen forests, moist deciduous forests, littoral and tidal forests, and all these come into our pictures actually. So the climate change is altering many of our Earth's ecosystems. Historically, we have depended on all elements of the biosphere for all our needs. What are our elements? Air that we breathe, the food we eat from the ecosystem services, ecosystem productivities, the energy we use, the materials we need for all purposes of our dwelling on this planet. However, unsustainable human activities like producing chlorofluorocarbons and creating more carbon dioxide, sending more carbon monoxide, and all these things, they are creating unsustainable and unpardonable changes in the not only the climate, even the biosphere itself. However, unsustainable human activities and over exploitation of the species and natural resources that make up the habitats and ecosystems of all wildlife are imperiling the world's biodiversity. So nearly a quarter of all species are presently at risk of going extinct. Extinct means no more we can see them on this planet again and again. And there are many such species at the brink of extinction. Now you see, till 1970s, during 1970s, the tiger became one of the uh, highly endangered animal. Many top predatory species, they have become at the verge of extinction. And thanks to the governments taken decision promptly, even the crocodiles, 3 species of crocodiles of India and 20 species of crocodiles of the world, they were also at the verge of extinction. Thanks to the FAO and the United Nations, we could able to bring them back into the life. So nearly a quarter of all species present a risk of going extinct in the coming decades, and their demise would only speed up the disappearance of the countless others. They are interdependent for food, interdependent for the tropics, trophic at energy levels and all these things. Wild plants and animals in their many varied and beautiful forms as a component of the world's biological diversity, they're also going to vanish from the earth. We'll work to raise awareness of the multitude of benefits of wildlife to people. It is high time we must educate the people. However, whatever they be, maybe from the zero literacy to the even up to the doctorates, I think we need to give a proper scientific explanation to convince these people, particularly those communities who live in closest proximity to the ecosystem. That means tribal who are living there. They are much better than us. They have excellent knowledge. Recently, you must have seen in the WhatsApp circulations, postings, one of a tribal lady, the old lady, got the Padma Shri award. As over, now coming to the climate actions. So far, our two speakers, they spoke about the catastrophic hazards that are going to happen because of the climate change. Now, about 190 world leaders and tens of thousands of government representatives, business and citizens, now they're gathering there at 26th session of the conference of the parties in Glasgow for the last 10 days. They are working there. There are lots of negotiations are taking place. Lots of side events are also taking place as to how to reduce the climate change gases that are contributing for its destruction of the ecosystems and all that. So what can we expect from this COP26? Now the national leaders are gathered and we should ask them to take the necessary steps to reduce emissions, mobilize funding, and boost adaptations and resilience capacity. I made an experiment of the resilience capacity while I was working in Srisal as a deputy conservator of forest. The highly degraded area I could able to brought back into the natural vegetation woodlots, and because of certain very low cost interventions, you could able to bring it. See, once you stop all interventions, the nature knows how to bring it back into the because of its resilience capacity. Countries are also being asked to come forward with ambitious 2030 emissions reductions targets that align with reaching net zero by the middle of the century. See, already our Prime Minister has promised to bring our country to net zero by 2070. I think like that, all other countries have to pronounce that by some time they should bring their countries into the net zero emissions. To achieve these goals, developed countries will need to make good on their promise. They are giving promises and not fulfilling their promises at the end of the period. And they must mobilize at least $100 billion in climate finance per year for developing countries by 2030. Public and private sector should also assist financially and need to provide the trillions required to secure global net zero. Bringing global net zero, it is not for somebody else. It is for very existence of the human beings, Homo sapiens, our next generation people. Yesterday we have seen the Tamil Nadu girl, how she has pronounced, how she could able to spell out her anguish before all the world leaders and got high appreciations from the world leaders. Public and private sector financial institutions will also contribute to the bringing global net zero. Parties are also discussing several articles of the Paris Agreement. They set the target of keeping global warming this century to less than 2 degrees centigrade, while pursuing efforts to keep it much below 1.5 degrees centigrade. Then this also includes finance. The negotiations are happening. This includes finance, carbon markets, loss and damage, transparency, and looking to wrap up important technical details of the Paris rule book. So these are some of the things. So people discuss of the Paris Agreement and also discuss how far they could able to fulfill their commitments. So in case if they did not, they should also add it up to the present negotiations. What is that we want to see at the end of the climate talks? World as a society, we hope that COP26 will result in a increased global action on 3 core policy areas. What are these core policy areas? That is the mitigation. That means reduction of the these agents, climate agents, which are contributing deleterious gases emissions into the atmosphere. That is the mitigation. Adaptation. How best we can adapt our lifestyles, how best we can adapt the food yields, crop yields, and all these things. Adaptation to the changing environment, changing climate conditions, and some areas which are permanently drought areas may see the heavy rainfall and floodings. And those areas known for high rainfall may become the drought-prone areas. So, sorry. So we need to have a good strategy to adapt to the changing climates. And also we need good finance. Sufficient bulk of finance is needed to attend, especially by the third world countries and poor countries like Africa, and even we are not a very rich country to cope with all these kind of things. This means credible political commitment is needed from the world leaders. and from each country to reduce national emissions and adapt to climate change, known as nationally determined contributions, NDCs, along with agreement on critical technical issues, exchange of the technical issues, demonstrated movement by the private sector, and financial commitments by the public and private financial institution. These should also take place, and people should come forward to contribute their might. Maybe lots of companies are working, getting lots of profits, and they must share some percentage of share to the to protect the our climate and ecosystems of the world. To achieve these goals, we should developed countries shall need, I told you already, 100 billions, and and parties now attending to the COP26. Now they're discussing several articles of the Paris Agreement, and what kind of hopes we should expect at the end of these talks. Hope that COP26 will result in increased global action together, but united actions which should take place on three core policies, as already I told you: mitigation, adaptation, and finance. And another contributor, gaseous contributor, is the methane. World Climate Program meeting of experts at Vienna in 1981. They have discussed on the role of carbon dioxide and climate variations, projected increase of global temperature by 1.5 degrees centigrade to 3.5 degrees centigrade through doubling of these carbon dioxide concentrations. So by doubling the carbon dioxide, the global temperature is going to increase from 1.5 to 3.5 degrees centigrade. Then imagine at 1.1 degrees Celsius, we are facing all these kind of things. If the scenario is not controlled and we may reach up to 3.5 degrees of Celsius centigrade, then imagine, and temperature will soar up to maximum, even more than 50 degrees on this planet. And UNEP report says the methane is crucial for short-term climate actions. See, methane, a lot of methane is, even the developed countries, they're saying, even USA, the president of the past president of USA, he was telling that India is contributing maximum percentage of methane to the world, into the climate, into the weather. So, because we are the largest, apart from other small countries, we are the largest production of the rice. So, rice fields, they produce maximum methane. This gas has got a global warming potential of more than 80 times that of carbon dioxide. That makes it a powerful heat trapper. Methane traps the heat in the atmosphere much higher than the carbon dioxide's contribution. In practice, this means reducing methane emissions can have a faster impact on the reducing global warming and buy us some valuable time. We can, it creates a heat in the atmosphere, and by adopting certain mitigation measures, I think we can reduce also the heat trap in the atmosphere. Over 60 countries have joined the global methane pledge to cut the methane emissions by 30% by 2030. The report shows it is feasible to achieve this goal in the oil and gas, agriculture, and waste sectors too, at low or no cost. And the key findings of the UNPM report to 2021 is the annual. It highlights the difference between where greenhouse gases are predicted to be in 2030 based on current government commitments and where they need to be to meet the targets in the Paris Agreement. So, to conclude, the report shows that the NDCs are insufficient or fall short. Current commitments put the world on track for a global temperature rise of 2.7 degrees centigrade by the end of the century. The report also finds that the new and updated NDCs introduced by 120 countries on 12th November 2021 shall take only 7.5% of predicted 2030 emissions, while a 55% of reduction is needed to meet the 1.5 degrees centigrade targets. So net zero commitment could help and 0.5 degrees of the 2.7 degrees centigrade. So we are not too late. It is not too late. Let us wake up. It is no longer a future problem. It is a problem of today. The clock is ticking loudly. To limit global warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade, the next 8 to 9 years will be very crucial to the human race. Greenhouse gases need to be halved. In practice, this means on top of the new NDCs, a further 28 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent of annual emissions must be reduced. An annual drop in emissions of 13 gigatons carbon dioxide equivalent is needed to limit the temperature rise to 2 degrees centigrade. So what would a temperature rise of over 2.7 degrees mean? For the planet, any temperature increase approaching 2.7 degrees centigrade would be a disaster for humanity and many of the planet species, not only human beings, even other species of plants and animals too. According to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, that is IPCC, even an increase of 2 degrees centigrade of temperature would have a major impact on the food security and human health. Even insects, vital for pollination of crops and plants, are likely to lose half their habitat at 1.5 degrees centigrade. This becomes twice as likely at 2 degrees centigrade. The frequency and intensity of droughts, storms, as I told you in the beginning, and extreme weather events will rise with every increment in temperature, as we are already seeing with a global temperature increase over pre-industrial levels of around 1.2 degrees centigrade. Recently, we have witnessed during COVID-19 pandemic phase, it did lead to 5.4% global drop in carbon dioxide into 2020, but it was a temporary reduction. In 2021, levels are predicted to be only slightly lower than the record high of 2019, pushing the carbon dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere to the highest it has been in the last 2 million years. And we have not seen last 2 million years back this kind of high temperature range. Only 17 to 19% of pandemic economic recovery, that is $438 billion out of $2.28 trillion is being used for green recovery and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Of the green recovery, 90% comes from 7 countries, which needs to be expanded. Even many more countries need to be joined in this thing. Then, how can net zero pledges help? People are taking pledges, and how is it going to help plug the emissions gap? So, if you look at the emissions gap report 2021, again, as I told you, mitigation pledges for 2030 it gives a 66% chance of hitting a global temperature rise of 2.7 degrees centigrade by the end of the century. If implemented effectively and reflected in NDCs, a net zero pledges can take 0.5 degrees centigrade off the 2.7 degrees centigrade, coming closer to the 2 degrees centigrade goal of the Paris Agreement. So, to do this, what we need to do is, there is a formula pointed by United Nations Environmental Program in 6-sector solution. 6-sector solution is a roadmap to reducing the emissions across sectors already agreed with the Paris Agreement commitments. These are all industry. Industries are one of the largest contributors of the emissions, and so let us reduce these emissions, the contribution of these emissions to some percentage. They're sending lots of emissions, carbon dioxide, methane, all emissions are from the industries. I think industries should also go for zero emissions kind of devices they need to develop in their infrastructure. And agriculture and food sector, they also contribute a lot. I think we need to have revised policies for agriculture and food securities. Forest and land use, there are umpteen number of policies are there. The only thing is it needs an effective policy implementation by the implementers like Forest Department and Minister of Environment and Forest. They have the big challenge to cope with this kind of bringing down the destruction rate of the forest and all this thing. And another contributor to the transport sector, and they also give rise lots of chlorofluorocarbons and all these things. And in urban areas, construction buildings and urban development, cities and all these things, they are also contributing. I think we need to devise some very effective policies to guide the departments of the country, not only in our country, but globally. I think all these things are being discussed in the COP26, and this is going to end by November 12th. I think let us wait for the report of what the world is now going to give to their best promises and best guidance, and let us hope things move in a good direction. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, Uma, Saibas, and Health Center. Thank you. Thank you for all your work.
Thank you, sir. It's very, very insightful and very, very critical analysis and critical perceptions on the climate change and how to see the world climate neutral. And many things you have touched upon, like net zero emissions and the sectoral roles, industry and all other areas, which sector contributes and what they can do. And you touched upon historical outline how this climate change implications are came evident and these things. And out of your experience and your thoughts and good intentions for the good earth, you have presented a very very beautiful and learning presentation. And it's very enriching on the subject of climate change and biodiversity, sir. I wish your insights will come true and we will achieve climate security, and in this short span of cushion time we can achieve this climate climate neutrality. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And we look forward for more interactions and your insights for the benefit of the earth, good earth and the people. And now we move on to the next speaker. Sir, Dr. Nagaraju sir is from Government City College. Anyway, it's a good presentation, sir. And now
Thank you.